Story 1. When the Pines Whispered Back. The day Marcus Webb walked out of the Cascade Mountains alone, everyone in our small Oregon logging town knew something had gone terribly wrong. Marcus and his crew, 5 experienced loggers, had headed up to Section 9 of the old-growth forest on a Tuesday morning. They were supposed to clear a designated area, nothing unusual. They'd done it 100 times before, but when Marcus came stumbling down the mountain road 3 days later, covered in sap and dirt, his eyes hollow and distant, he was the only one to return. He walked straight into Maggie's diner on Main Street, still wearing his work gear, chainsaw oil staining his flannel shirt. The lunch crowd fell silent as he set his hard hat on the counter and ordered black coffee with shaking hands. Sheriff Kowalski was there within minutes. "Marcus, where's your crew?" Marcus stared into his coffee cup for a long moment before answering. His voice was barely a whisper. "The trees. They took them." Marcus was taken in for questioning, suspected of some kind of workplace accident or worse. Our town had seen its share of logging incidents, crushed limbs, falling timber, all the occupational hazards that come with the job. But this was different. Marcus insisted he hadn't hurt anyone, that something in the forest had changed, had awakened. The investigators didn't believe him, of course. How could they? But those of us who'd lived in that town for generations, whose families had worked those forests for over a century, we started noticing things. Old Tom Hendricks, who ran the tree nursery on the edge of town, was the first to report it. His saplings, young Douglas firs barely 3 feet tall, had grown overnight to over 15 feet. The roots had burst through the bottoms of their containers, spreading across his greenhouse floor in thick, woody networks that looked almost deliberate. "It's like they're reaching for something," Tom told anyone who'd listen, "like they're trying to connect." Then came the incident at Riverside Elementary. The playground had been built near a grove of mature cedars, trees that had stood there peacefully for decades. But one morning, the teachers arrived to find that roots had erupted through the asphalt playground, creating a maze of gnarled, twisting obstacles. The swings had been completely engulfed, absorbed into the wood, as if the trees were reclaiming what had been taken from them. They closed the school immediately. The sheriff organized a search party for the missing loggers. 40 volunteers with GPS units, satellite phones, and enough emergency supplies to handle anything the mountains could throw at them. They headed up to Section 9, following Marcus's descriptions of where the crew had been working. What they found defied explanation. The logging equipment was still there. Chainsaws, the feller buncher, even their lunch coolers. But the forest around the work site had transformed. Trees that had been marked for cutting now bore strange symbols carved deep into their bark, patterns that looked almost like writing in some ancient language. And the stumps of trees that had been cut, they were bleeding. Not sap, blood. Thick, dark red blood seeped from the cut wood, pooling on the forest floor and attracting swarms of insects unlike any the searchers had ever seen. They looked like beetles, but moved with unsettling coordination, forming shapes and patterns as they crawled over the bleeding stumps. "We need to leave. Now," one of the deputies said, his voice cracking with barely controlled fear. But they couldn't find the missing loggers. No bodies, no signs of struggle, nothing. It was as if the 4 men had simply vanished into the forest itself. The search party made it back to town just before dark, and every single one of them reported the same thing. They felt watched the entire time, not by animals, but by the forest itself. The trees seemed to lean toward them as they passed, branches creaking and groaning, even when there was no wind. That night, things got worse. Sarah Chen, who owned the bed and breakfast on Maple Street, woke to the sound of scratching on her window. When she turned on the bedside lamp, she screamed. Vines, thick, thorny vines that hadn't been there when she went to bed, had grown up the side of her Victorian house and were pressing against the glass, probing for a way inside. Similar reports came in from across town. Plants were growing at impossible rates, and they were becoming aggressive. Mrs. Patterson's rose bushes trapped her cat in a cage of thorns. The ivy at City Hall completely covered the front entrance in less than an hour, and the old oak in the town square, a tree that had been there since before the town was founded, split its trunk open to reveal a hollow interior lined with what looked disturbingly like teeth. "We need to evacuate," Mayor Phillips announced at an emergency town meeting the next morning. "This is beyond anything we can handle. I've been in contact with the State Emergency Management Office, and they're sending help." But the help never came. The main highway out of town, the only paved road connecting us to the outside world, had been completely overtaken by forest growth. In less than 24 hours, fully mature trees had sprouted through the asphalt, creating an impassable barrier. Their roots had undermined the road so thoroughly that sections of it had collapsed entirely. We were cut off. Cell service went next, then landlines, then internet. Every communication line ran through the forest, and whatever was happening out there was systematically severing our connection to the outside world. "It doesn't want us to leave," Marcus said when they brought him to the emergency town meeting. He'd been kept in the sheriff's office for his own protection, but now they needed his knowledge. "It doesn't want us to call for help. The forest has been waiting for this for a long time." "Waiting for what?" Sheriff Kowalski demanded. "For us to understand that we don't own this land. It owns us." Marcus explained what had really happened to his crew. They'd been cutting down a particularly massive cedar, a tree that had to be at least 500 years old. The moment the chainsaw bit into its trunk, everything changed. The other trees started screaming, not with sound, but with something the men felt in their bones, in their teeth, a vibration that made their skulls ache and their vision blur. His crew tried to run, but the forest had other plans. Roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around ankles and wrists. Branches bent at impossible angles, reaching down like arms. Marcus only escaped because he'd been operating the Feller Buncher, protected by the machine's metal cab. He watched his friends disappear into the trees, not eaten, not killed, but absorbed. The bark opened like mouths and swallowed them whole. "They're not dead," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "They're part of it now, part of the forest. I can still hear them sometimes, whispering in the wind." Nobody wanted to believe him, but we didn't have a choice. That afternoon, they found the first hybrid. It was Jacob Morrison, one of the missing loggers, or what was left of him. He stumbled out of the forest near the old lumber mill, and those who saw him said he looked like a tree trying to be human. His skin had turned to bark, thick and ridged. His fingers had elongated into branch-like appendages, and where his eyes should have been, there were only dark knots in the wood. Moss grew in his hair, and when he opened his mouth to speak, all that came out was the creaking sound of timber under stress. He collapsed before reaching the mill, and by the time anyone got close enough to help, he'd taken root. Literally. His feet split open and sent taproots deep into the earth, and his body began the final transformation into a tree. They tried to move him, to cut him free, but the moment they brought a saw near him, every plant in a 100-yard radius began to writhe and thrash. They had to back away and watch as Jacob Morrison completed his metamorphosis, becoming a twisted birch tree that still bore a horrifying resemblance to a human form, frozen in silent agony. 3 more hybrids appeared over the next 2 days. Each time, the same process. Each time, a new tree that looked wrong, that bent the laws of nature into something nightmarish. The forest was sending us a message. By the end of the first week, 1/3 of the town's population had fled into the wilderness, trying to find another way out. We never saw most of them again. Those who did return came back changed, quieter, distant, with a greenish tint to their skin and a tendency to stare at the sun for hours without blinking. The plants inside town limits began to act with purpose. They separated families, corralled people into specific areas. The forest was herding us like cattle, and we were powerless to stop it. Then came the night of the great bloom. Every plant in town, every tree, every shrub, every blade of grass bloomed simultaneously. But these weren't normal flowers. They were massive, luminescent things that opened like eyes and released clouds of pollen that glowed with a sickly yellow-green light. The pollen was hallucinogenic. People who breathed it in reported seeing the world from the perspective of the trees, feeling their roots deep in the earth, their branches reaching for the sky. Some people never came back from those visions. They'd stand perfectly still for hours, days even, barely breathing, photosynthesizing like the plants around them. I was lucky. I'd been in the basement of the community center when the Great Bloom happened, working on getting the backup generator running. The concrete walls and lack of ventilation saved me from the worst of it. When I emerged the next morning, the town had been transformed. It looked like something from a dark fairy tale. Buildings wrapped in flowering vines, streets carpeted with bioluminescent moss, and people who were no longer entirely human, wandering among the hybrid trees with blank, peaceful expressions. Sheriff Kowalski found me that afternoon. She'd barricaded herself in the police station with a handful of others who'd managed to avoid the pollen. "We have to destroy it," she said. "The source. Whatever started this, it's still out there in Section 9. Marcus was right. It all began with that cedar they were cutting down. If we can kill it, maybe this stops." It was a desperate plan, but it was all we had. We gathered what we could: axes, chainsaws, gasoline. Marcus insisted on coming with us, said he owed it to his crew. There were 8 of us in total who made the trek back up to Section 9. The forest fought us every step of the way. Roots tried to trip us. Branches swung like clubs. The air itself seemed thick with hostility. But we pushed forward, determined. When we finally reached the cedar Marcus had been cutting, we understood the scope of what we were facing. It was massive, easily 200 feet tall and 40 feet in diameter at the base. But that wasn't what made us stop and stare. The tree had faces, dozens of them, barely visible in the bark, twisted expressions of the people it had absorbed over what must have been centuries. And in the center, at eye level, was a split in the trunk that opened and closed like a mouth, revealing an interior that pulsed with something that might have been a heartbeat. "It's alive," whispered one of our group. "Not just alive like a tree, alive like us." Marcus stepped forward, chainsaw in hand. "I'm sorry," he said to the tree, "but this has to end." The moment the chainsaw roared to life, the entire forest erupted in sound, a deafening shriek that seemed to come from every tree, every plant, every living, growing thing for miles around. But Marcus didn't stop. He pressed the chainsaw blade against the bark, and the tree bled. That same dark red blood they'd found before, pouring out in thick streams. The tree fought back. Branches lashed down, trying to knock the chainsaw from Marcus's hands. Roots erupted around his feet, attempting to drag him down, but the rest of us were there, hacking at the roots with axes, keeping them at bay. It took hours. The cedar was so massive and it didn't want to die, but inch by inch, we cut through it. The faces in the bark screamed silently. The mouth-like opening in the trunk shrieked and howled. When the tree finally began to fall, the forest fell silent. Completely, utterly silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the creaking sound of that ancient cedar tipping, falling, crashing to the forest floor with a sound like thunder. The moment it hit the ground, everything changed. The aggressive plants withered. The hybrid people collapsed. The impossible growth that had overtaken our town began to retreat, dying back at a rate almost as fast as it had appeared. By the time we made it back to town the next morning, things looked almost normal. The forest had returned to being just a forest. The people who'd been transformed were slowly recovering, though most had no memory of what they'd done while under the forest's influence. We lost 63 people during those 2 weeks. Some were absorbed by the trees and died when we killed the cedar. Others disappeared into the forest and were never found. A few died in accidents caused by the aggressive plant growth. Marcus Webb left town the day after we killed the cedar, said he couldn't stand to be near the forest anymore, that he still heard his crew calling to him in his dreams. The logging company never came back. The state declared Section 9 a protected wilderness area, not because of what we'd experienced, but because of unusual ecological sensitivity. The official report blamed everything on mass hysteria caused by a toxic mold spore. But those of us who were there, who lived through it, we know the truth. The forest is old, older than us, older than our civilization. And it remembers every tree we've cut, every acre we've cleared. What happened in our town was just a warning. The next time the forest wakes up, it might not be so forgiving. Story 2, Classified Operation, Memorandum, 4471. Confidential, Eyes Only, Department of Homeland Security, Special Activities Division Incident Report. 44471B date, March 23, 29 location, Abandoned Textile Mill, Gary, Indiana Reporting Agent, Mitchell Torres, Badge, Seer, JICE SAC 22847. The following is a transcript of the incident that occurred during Operation Nightshade. This document is to be sealed for 75 years per standard protocol regarding anomalous events. Interview transcript subject, Agent Torres. Mitchell interviewer, Director Sarah Vance. Date, March 25th, 2019. Vance, Agent Torres, for the record, please state your operational designation during Operation Nightshade. Torres, call sign Reaper 6, ma'am. Team leader for the entry squad. Vance, and you understood the nature of your mission? Torres, yes, ma'am. We were told there was a potential bioweapon being developed in the abandoned Kellerman textile mill. Intelligence suggested a domestic terror cell was using the location as a laboratory. Our orders were to secure the facility and extract any materials for analysis. Vance, but that's not what you found. Torres, no, ma'am, that's not what we found. Vance, please explain in your own words what happened when your team entered the facility. Torres, we breached at 0340 hours. Standard entry protocol, flashbangs, coordinated room clearing. The mill was huge. 4 stories of rusted equipment and broken windows. Our thermal imaging showed no heat signatures, which we thought meant the place was empty. We were wrong. The first floor was clean. Second floor, same thing. But when we reached the 3rd floor, that's when Harris noticed it. Vance, noticed what? Torres, the walls were wrong. At first, we thought it was just water damage or mold. But when Harris got closer with his flashlight, we saw it was moving, pulsing, like it was breathing. Vance, and what was your assessment of this material? Torres, initially, we thought it was some kind of fungal growth, maybe the bioweapon we were looking for. But then Rodriguez touched it. Vance, why did he touch it? Torres, he didn't mean to. He backed into a wall while covering our 6, and his shoulder brushed against it. The moment he made contact, he started screaming. Vance, describe what happened to Rodriguez. Torres, the material, whatever it was, it spread onto him. Fast, like it was hungry, it covered his shoulder, then his neck, then his face. We tried to pull it off him, but it was under his skin by then. We could see it moving beneath the surface, spreading through his veins like roots through soil. Rodriguez was dead in less than a minute, but his body kept moving. Vance, explain. Torres, the material was controlling him, using him like a puppet. He stood up, and when he turned to face us, his eyes were gone. Just empty sockets filled with that same pulsing matter. Then he spoke, but it wasn't Rodriguez's voice. Vance, what did it say? Torres, it said, finally, fresh soil for the garden. Vance, and then? Torres, we ran. Standard protocol be damned. We ran. But the material was spreading fast, flowing across the walls and floor like water. It cut off our exit route, forced us up to the 4th floor. That's where we found them. Vance, the previous victims? Torres, yes, ma'am. 30, maybe 40 bodies, or what was left of them. They were all connected to this mass of organic material that covered the entire 4th floor. Some were recent enough that we could still see their faces. Others had been there so long they were just skeletons held together by the growth. And they were all still alive, conscious. We could see their eyes moving, hear them trying to scream through throats that were filled with that material. Vance, how did you escape? Torres, Harris remembered the fire escape on the west side of the building. We had to fight our way through, and I mean fight. The material had formed. Appendages, I guess you'd call them. Tentacles made of compressed organic matter that tried to grab us, pull us into the mass. Chen didn't make it. One of those things caught his leg, and before we could cut him free, it pulled him into the wall. He didn't even have time to scream. Harris and I made it to the fire escape, but the rust had fused it in place. We had to shoot the locks off and pry it open. All the while, that thing was spreading toward us, and we could hear it speaking through the bodies it controlled, all their voices in unison. Join the garden. Become one with the soil. We got the escape open and climbed down. 3 stories, moving as fast as we could. When we hit the ground, we ran. Didn't stop running until we were 6 blocks away. Vance, and then you called in the containment team? Torres, yes ma'am. They arrived within the hour, sealed the entire building and burned it. Thermite charges on every floor, hot enough to turn concrete to dust. Vance, did it work? Torres, they said it did. Said nothing could survive that kind of heat. But ma'am, I've been having dreams. Vance, what kind of dreams? Torres, I'm in a garden. A massive garden that stretches as far as I can see. And I'm buried in the soil, but I'm still alive, still conscious. And I can feel roots growing through me, connecting me to thousands of other people who are all buried in that same soil. And I can hear them all screaming. Vance, Agent Torres, you've been cleared by our psychological evaluation team. These dreams are a normal response to trauma. Torres, normal? Ma'am, with all due respect, there was nothing normal about what we saw in that building. Vance, nevertheless, you'll continue with your mandatory counseling sessions. And Agent Torres, you are not to discuss this operation with anyone. The official report states that your team encountered armed hostiles and that Agents Rodriguez and Chen died in the firefight. Torres, and if someone asks about what was really in that building, Vance, then you tell them it's classified, because it is. And it will remain classified for the rest of your natural life. Do you understand? Torres, yes ma'am, I understand. Vance, good, you're dismissed. And Torres, get some sleep, real sleep. Dr. Klein is prescribing you something that should help with the dreams. Torres, thank you ma'am. Addendum, Director's Notes. Agent Torres was placed on administrative leave for 6 months following this incident. He returned to active duty in September 2019, but requested transfer to a desk position. Request granted. The Kellerman Mill was demolished completely in April 2019. Soil samples from the site showed elevated levels of unknown organic compounds that broke down within 48 hours of collection, preventing further analysis. 3 other locations in the United States have shown similar characteristics. An abandoned hospital in Baltimore, a shopping mall in Detroit, and a subway station in New York City. All have been secured and are under continuous monitoring. We still don't know what the material is, where it came from, or if there are more sites we haven't discovered yet. But we do know one thing: it's patient. It can wait decades, maybe centuries, for the right conditions. And when those conditions are met, it blooms. God help us if we're not ready when it does. Story 3. The Thing in the Nursery. They say parenthood changes you. They don't tell you it might be the thing that came home from the hospital that does the changing. My name is Jennifer Hastings, and I need to tell someone what happened to my family. The police won't believe me. Child Protective Services thinks I had a psychotic break. My own mother crosses the street when she sees me coming, but I know what I saw. I know what it did. It started normally enough. My pregnancy was textbook. No complications. All the tests came back perfect. When our son was born on a rainy Tuesday in November, he was beautiful. 8 pounds, 6 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. A perfect, healthy baby boy. We named him Ethan. The first few weeks were typical new parent chaos. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, learning to decipher different types of cries. My husband David and I were exhausted, but happy. This was what we'd wanted for so long. The first sign that something was wrong came when Ethan was 3 weeks old. I'd put him down for a nap in his crib, and when I came back an hour later to check on him, he wasn't where I'd left him. He was on the opposite side of the crib, facing the wall. "David, did you move the baby?" I called out. "What? No, I've been in the garage," he yelled back. I told myself I'd just remembered wrong. Sleep deprivation does strange things to your memory. But it kept happening. I'd put Ethan down in one position, and he'd be in a completely different one when I checked on him. Sometimes he'd be facing the opposite direction. Once, I found him standing, a 3-week-old baby, standing upright in his crib, hands gripping the rails. "Babies can't do that," I told David. "It's physically impossible." "Maybe he's just advanced," David suggested, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Then came the night I heard Ethan talking. Not babbling, talking. Full sentences in a language I didn't recognize. I crept to his nursery door and peeked inside. Ethan was sitting up in his crib, silhouetted by the glow of his nightlight, and he was having a conversation with something. I couldn't see what it was. The corner of the room where he was looking was darker than it should have been, like the shadows there were thicker, more substantial. And as I listened, I began to make out a second voice responding to Ethan's strange language. Deep, rasping, wrong. When I flipped on the light, Ethan was alone, lying on his back, exactly as I'd left him, fast asleep. I told David about it the next morning, and he suggested we set up a baby monitor with video. That way, if anything weird happens, we'll have proof, he said. We installed it that afternoon, a high-end monitor with night vision and motion detection. That night, we watched the feed from our bedroom. For the first hour, nothing unusual happened. Ethan slept peacefully. But around 2 a.m., the motion detector went off. On the screen, we watched as the blanket over Ethan slowly moved aside. Then, the baby sat up. But he didn't move like a baby. His motions were too fluid, too controlled. He turned his head to look directly at the camera, and even through the grainy night vision feed, I could see that his eyes were wrong. They reflected the infrared light like an animal's eyes, glowing white in the darkness. Then he smiled. Not a baby's smile, something else. Something that knew we were watching. David jumped out of bed and ran to the nursery. I followed close behind. When we burst through the door, Ethan was lying in his crib, fast asleep, exactly as a normal baby should be. "Did you see his eyes?" I whispered to David. "The camera must be malfunctioning," he said, but his hands were shaking. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. We sat in the nursery, watching Ethan, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The next day, David called the company that made the baby monitor. They said they'd send someone to check it, but before the technician could arrive, things got much worse. I was giving Ethan a bath when I noticed the marks on his back. 5 small bruises, evenly spaced, like fingerprints, but they were too large to be mine or David's. The spacing was wrong. "David!" I called out, trying to keep my voice calm so I wouldn't scare the baby. "Come look at this." When David saw the marks, his face went pale. "We need to take him to the doctor." At the pediatrician's office, Dr. Morrison examined the bruises with a furrowed brow. "Mrs. Hastings, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I knew what she was getting at. "I didn't hurt my baby," I said firmly. Has anyone else been around Ethan? Babysitters? Family members? No, it's just been me and my husband. Dr. Morrison made some notes in her chart. I'm required by law to report any suspected abuse, but I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. These bruises are unusual. The size and spacing don't quite match an adult hand. I'm going to document this, and I want to see Ethan again in a week. If there are any new marks, we'll need to involve Child Protective Services. We drove home in silence. I could feel David's eyes on me, questioning, doubting. I didn't do it, I said again. I know, he replied, but I wasn't sure he believed me. That night, I set up my phone to record in Ethan's room, hidden where the baby wouldn't see it. I had to know what was happening during those hours when we weren't watching. What I captured on video still gives me nightmares. Around midnight, Ethan woke up. He sat up in his crib and looked around the room with those wrong, glowing eyes. Then he spoke, in that same strange language I'd heard before. The shadows in the corner of the room began to move. They coalesced into a shape, humanoid but wrong, with limbs that were too long and fingers that had too many joints. It approached the crib, and I watched in horror as it reached down and picked up my baby. But Ethan didn't cry. He laughed, a sound no 3-week-old baby should be able to make. And as the thing held him, I saw the bruises forming on his back in real time, appearing beneath those impossibly long fingers. Then the thing spoke, and I understood the words this time. Soon, little one. Soon, you'll be ready. It placed Ethan back in the crib, and the shadows dispersed as if they'd never been there at all. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. When morning came, I showed David the video. He watched it 3 times in silence. Then he said, "We need to call someone. A priest, maybe?" "You don't even believe in God," I said. I didn't believe in whatever that thing was either, but I just watched it on video. We called every church in town. Most thought we were crazy, but Father Patrick from St. Michael's agreed to come see us. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that immediately put me at ease. We showed him the video. He watched it once, crossed himself, and said, "This child is not your son." "What do you mean?" David demanded. "I mean that something has replaced your real child. What you have now is a changeling, a substitute left by something that took your actual baby." "That's ridiculous," I said, even though part of me knew he was right. "This is Ethan. He looks exactly like our son." "Appearances can be deceiving," Father Patrick said gently. "These entities are masters of imitation, but they can't perfectly replicate human behavior, especially not in infants. The things you've witnessed, the impossible movements, the strange language, the shadow being, these are all signs." "So where's our real son?" David's voice cracked. "I don't know. But if we can force the changeling to reveal itself, we might be able to negotiate for his return." Father Patrick explained the ritual. It involved salt, iron, and prayer, elements that were anathema to fairy folk and other supernatural entities. We would create a circle of protection and confront the thing masquerading as our son. We prepared everything that night, drew the circle in the nursery with salt, placed iron nails at the cardinal points. Father Patrick brought holy water and his Bible. When everything was ready, I placed Ethan, or the thing pretending to be Ethan, in the center of the circle. Immediately, it began to scream. Not a baby's cry, but something that sounded like metal scraping on metal. Its face contorted, features shifting and changing. The skin rippled like water. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I command you to reveal yourself, Father Patrick shouted. The screaming intensified, and then the baby's form began to collapse, folding in on itself like origami in reverse. What emerged from that tiny body was something impossible to describe. All angles and shadows, and too many teeth. "Where is our son?" I screamed at it. The thing laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Gone. Taken. He will serve the court below as you were meant to serve." "Why?" David asked. "Why take our child?" "Because you were chosen. Your bloodline carries the mark. The child was owed to us, but we are not without mercy. You may have him back, for a price." "What price?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "A life for a life. One of you must take the child's place in the court below. Serve for 7 years, and the child will be returned." David and I looked at each other. I could see the same desperate calculation in his eyes that I felt in my heart. 7 years of our lives for our son's freedom. "I'll do it," we both said simultaneously. The creature smiled with too many teeth. "Only one may serve. You must choose." Before David could react, I stepped forward. "Take me." "Jennifer, no." David reached for me, but Father Patrick held him back. A mother's sacrifice. How touching. The creature's form rippled and changed, becoming almost beautiful for a moment. "Very well. You will serve 7 years in the court below. At the end of that time, your son will be returned to this place, exactly as he was taken. Do you accept these terms?" "I do," I said, my voice steady despite my terror. "Then it is done." The creature touched my forehead with one elongated finger, and everything went black. I don't remember much about the 7 years I spent in the court below. The memories slip away like water through my fingers whenever I try to grasp them. I remember darkness and cold. I remember creatures that wore human skin, like ill-fitting clothes. I remember tasks that made no sense, sorting shadows by size, counting the tears of the damned, weaving nets from spider silk and moonlight. But I also remember the promise. My son would be returned. When I finally emerged back into the human world, I found myself standing in my old nursery. David was there, older now, with gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. And in his arms was Ethan. But Ethan was still a baby, still 3 weeks old, exactly as he'd been when I left. "Jennifer," David's voice was hoarse. "Is it really you?" I nodded, unable to speak. 7 years had passed for him, but for Ethan, no time had passed at all. He would get to grow up. He would be safe. David told me later that after I vanished, Father Patrick helped him establish a new identity for Ethan, away from the house where everything had happened. He'd spent 7 years living in fear that the court below would go back on their bargain. But they hadn't. A deal was a deal, even in the realm of the Fae. Ethan is 15 now. He doesn't remember any of what happened. How could he? He was just a baby. We've never told him the truth. How do you explain to your child that he was stolen by fairies and that his mother spent 7 years in another realm to get him back? Sometimes, though, I catch him staring at shadows in the corner of rooms, and I wonder if some part of him remembers, if some deep, buried memory whispers to him in dreams. And sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't made that choice. If I'd let David go instead, or if we'd refuse the bargain altogether. But then I look at Ethan, happy, healthy, normal, and I know I made the right choice, even if I still have nightmares about the court below. Even if I sometimes see things in the shadows that no one else can see. Even if I know that 7 years of service has left marks on me that will never fully heal. My son is safe. That's all that matters. But if you're a parent and you notice your baby doing impossible things, moving in ways they shouldn't be able to move, speaking languages that sound like wind through dead trees, get help immediately, because the court below is always watching, always waiting, and they're always hungry for more. Story 4. The Farm of Renewal. I should have known something was wrong when Emily's family asked me to sign the waiver. It was right before my first visit to their farm in rural Nebraska. 150 acres of corn, soybeans, and livestock about an hour outside of Omaha. Emily and I had been dating for almost a year, and she was anxious for me to meet her parents and see where she grew up. "It's just a formality," she said, sliding the document across the table of the coffee shop where we'd met that morning. "All visitors have to sign it. It's about liability, you know, in case you get hurt on farm equipment or something." I'd skimmed through it. Standard stuff about assuming risks, not holding the property owners liable for injuries, not trespassing in restricted areas. I signed without thinking much about it. Big mistake. The drive out to the farm was beautiful. Late summer in Nebraska, with fields of corn stretching to the horizon under a brilliant blue sky. Emily was excited, pointing out landmarks from her childhood. The creek where she'd learned to fish. The old barn where she'd hidden from her chores. "You're going to love it here," she said, squeezing my hand. "It's so peaceful, nothing like the city." She was right about it being different from the city. But peaceful? That's not the word I'd use. The farmhouse came into view as we turned down a long gravel driveway. It was a classic American Gothic structure. White clapboard, black shutters, a wide porch with a swing. Behind it were several outbuildings, a massive red barn, a machine shed, a chicken coop, and what looked like a greenhouse. Emily's parents, Frank and Margaret Wheeler, were waiting on the porch. Frank was tall and lean, with the weathered skin of someone who'd spent decades working outdoors. Margaret was smaller, with sharp eyes that seemed to take my measure in a single glance. "So you're Tom," Frank said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crush stone. "Emily's told us a lot about you." "All good things, I hope?" I replied with a nervous laugh. "We'll see," Margaret said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The first day was fine. Frank gave me a tour of the farm, showing me the various crops and explaining their rotation system. The corn was the tallest I'd ever seen, at least 10 feet high, with thick stalks and ears that looked almost artificially large. "Good soil here," Frank said, kneeling to pick up a handful of the rich, dark earth. "Been in the family for 5 generations. We know how to take care of it, and it takes care of us." In the barn, I met their livestock, primarily cattle, but also some pigs and chickens. The animals all looked healthy, almost unnaturally so. The cows' coats were glossy, their eyes bright and alert. Even the barn smelled better than it should have, like fresh hay instead of manure. "You keep a clean operation here," I commented. "Cleanliness is next to godliness," Margaret said from behind me, making me jump. I hadn't heard her approach. We take pride in our stewardship of the land and animals God has entrusted to us. That night at dinner, I learned more about the Wheeler family history. They'd been farming this land since the 1870s, when Emily's great-great-grandfather had claimed it under the Homestead Act. Every generation had worked the farm, and Emily was expected to eventually take it over. Of course, that depends on who she marries, Frank said, looking at me meaningfully. Can't run a farm this size alone. Needs a partnership, someone willing to commit. Dad, Emily protested, her cheeks reddening. Just making conversation, Frank said innocently. After dinner, Emily and I walked down to the creek that ran through the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sorry about my parents, she said. They can be a bit intense about the farm stuff. It's fine, I get it. This place is important to them. It's more than important. It's everything. She paused, biting her lip. Tom, there's something I should tell you about the farm, about my family. Before she could continue, we heard Frank calling us back for dessert. Whatever Emily had been about to say remained unspoken. That night, I had the first dream. I was standing in the cornfield, but the corn was different, darker, with stalks that twisted and writhed like living things. As I walked between the rows, I realized the corn wasn't growing from the soil. It was growing from bodies, human bodies buried vertically in the earth, their faces frozen in silent screams as the corn stalks erupted from their mouths and eye sockets. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. Through the window of the guest room, I could see the real cornfield swaying gently in the night breeze. Normal, peaceful. Just a nightmare, I told myself. Stress from meeting the parents. The next day, Frank put me to work. Can't have you sitting around being a guest, he said with a grin. Everyone who stays here earns their keep. He started me on simple tasks, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, helping to repair a section of fence. But as the day wore on, the jobs got stranger. Need you to help me with the crop rotation markers, Frank said after lunch, handing me a wooden stake with strange symbols carved into it. Every 7th row needs one of these. What do the symbols mean? I asked, examining the intricate carvings. Old family tradition for luck and good harvest. He didn't quite meet my eyes when he said it. As I walked through the cornfield, placing the markers according to Frank's directions, I started to feel dizzy. The symbols on the stakes seemed to shimmer and shift in my peripheral vision, never quite looking the same way twice. And the corn itself seemed to lean toward me as I passed, stalks rustling even when there was no wind. I found Emily later that afternoon in the greenhouse, tending to vegetables. But these weren't normal vegetables. The tomatoes were the size of small pumpkins, and their skin had an odd, slightly translucent quality. The carrots were so large that Emily needed both hands to pull one from the soil. This is insane, I said, staring at a cucumber that had to be 3 feet long. What are you using to grow these? Some kind of super fertilizer? Emily's expression was hard to read. Tom, remember how I said I needed to tell you something about the farm? Yeah? Promise me you won't freak out. Emily, you're starting to scare me. She took a deep breath. This farm is special. The soil here, it's not like anywhere else. It's been enriched over generations by our family's dedication and sacrifice. The yields we get, the health of our animals, our prosperity, it all comes from that commitment. Okay, that sounds pretty normal for a family farm. It's not just hard work and good farming practices, Tom. There's a compact, an agreement my great-great-grandfather made when he first settled this land. An agreement with who? Before she could answer, Margaret appeared at the greenhouse door. Emily, dear, your father needs you in the barn. Tom, why don't you come help me prepare dinner? In the kitchen, Margaret set me to peeling potatoes while she prepared a roast. We worked in silence for a few minutes before she spoke. Emily's very fond of you, she said, not looking up from her work. I'm very fond of her too. Fond enough to make a life here? To carry on the traditions? I don't know. We've never really talked about marriage or... This farm requires commitment, Margaret interrupted. From everyone who lives here, no exceptions. What kind of commitment? She finally looked at me, and there was something in her eyes that made me deeply uncomfortable. The same commitment 5 generations of Wheelers have made. The land provides, but only if we feed it in return. Feed it? With what? Margaret smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Finish those potatoes, dear. We'll talk more at dinner. That night's dinner was uncomfortably quiet. Frank and Margaret exchanged meaningful glances while Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. The food was delicious. The roast practically melted in my mouth, and the vegetables had a flavor intensity I'd never experienced before. But I could barely eat. The tension in the room was suffocating. After dinner, Emily finally pulled me aside. We need to talk, really talk. Come to the barn. The barn was dark, except for a single lantern hanging from a beam. Emily led me to the back, where a wooden door was set into the floor, a root cellar entrance. What's down there? I asked. The truth, she said quietly. Tom, I care about you. That's why I need you to see this before things go any further. She opened the door and started down the wooden steps. Against my better judgment, I followed. The root cellar was larger than I expected, extending far beyond the barn's footprint. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of preserved vegetables. But that's not what caught my attention. In the center of the room was a well, but instead of being filled with water, it appeared to contain soil, rich, dark, slightly luminescent soil that seemed to pulse with a faint heartbeat. This is the source, Emily said, the well of renewal. It's what makes our farm so productive. The original compact was made here when my great-great-grandfather discovered it. Discovered what? What is this thing? We don't know exactly. Some kind of entity that lives in the earth. It feeds on death and decay, and in return, it produces this soil that makes everything grow beyond normal limits. I laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Some kind of weird farm hazing ritual for the city boyfriend? I wish it was. Emily's voice was dead serious. Every 7 years, the well needs to be replenished. It needs a sacrifice, something living to renew its power. Sacrifice? Emily, what the hell are you talking about? Usually it's an animal, a cow or a pig. But sometimes, she trailed off. Sometimes what? Sometimes it asks for more. I started backing toward the stairs. I think I should leave. Tom, wait. But I was already running. Up the stairs, out of the barn, across the yard toward my car. But when I got there, my keys were gone. So was my phone. Frank was standing on the porch, holding them. I think we need to have a conversation, son. Give me my keys. I want to leave, now. Can't do that. See, the well has been getting weaker. We've been feeding it animals, but it's not enough anymore. It wants what it was originally promised, which is human vitality, human life force. That's what the original compact entailed. One sacrifice every 7 years to keep the land fertile. But my great-great-grandfather couldn't bear to do it, so he negotiated a different arrangement. He'd bring outsiders to the farm, let the well feed on their energy slowly over time. Visitors would leave feeling tired, aged, but they'd recover. It was sustainable. But I could sense the but coming. But we got greedy, started producing more, selling to larger markets. The well needed more energy to keep up with our demands. So the family made a new arrangement. Every 7 years, we bring someone to the farm. Someone unattached, someone who won't be missed right away. And we offer them a choice. What choice? Margaret had joined Frank on the porch. Become part of the farm permanently and let the well feed on you slowly for the rest of your natural life. You'll live here, work here, and the land will sustain you. Or give everything to the well at once. A quick death, your essence absorbed completely, and 7 more years of prosperity for the farm. I looked from Frank to Margaret to Emily, who had emerged from the barn behind me. Emily, please, tell me this is insane. It is insane, she said, tears streaming down her face. But it's also real. Tom, I didn't want this. I've been fighting with them for months about finding another way, but the well is hungry, and the 7 years are almost up. So you brought me here to be, what? Food for some underground monster? I brought you here because I thought you'd understand. Because I thought maybe, if you saw how beautiful the farm is, how important this work is, you'd be willing to stay. Not as a sacrifice, but as a partner, to help me find a better way. A better way? Your family is talking about killing me. Frank sighed. We're not going to kill you, Tom. We're giving you a choice. Most people choose to stay. The life here is good. The food, the peace, the connection to the land. You'd be amazed how many people find that preferable to whatever life they left behind. And if I choose to leave, then you'll leave, Margaret said simply. But the well will remember you. And wherever you go, whatever you do, you'll feel it pulling at you, draining you. You'll age faster, sicken easier. Within a year, you'll waste away to nothing. You're insane, all of you. I ran, didn't know where I was going. Just knew I had to get away from these crazy people and their crazy farm. I made it to the cornfield before Frank caught up with me. Tom, stop, listen to me. But I didn't stop. I plunged into the corn, pushing through the tall stalks, ignoring the way they seemed to grab at my clothes and hair. Behind me, I could hear Frank following, calling my name. Then I heard Emily scream. I stopped running and turned back. Through the corn stalks, I could see a glow. That same faint luminescence from the soil in the root cellar, but brighter now, spreading through the field like wildfire. Frank grabbed my arm. We need to get back to the house, now. The well is active. What does that mean? It means it's hungry enough to take what it wants instead of waiting for us to give it. We ran back toward the farmyard, but the glow was spreading faster than we could move. The corn began to writhe and twist, stalks bending at impossible angles, reaching out like arms. I saw Margaret on the porch, her arms raised, chanting something in a language I didn't recognize. Emily was beside her, tears still streaming down her face as she joined the chant. The corn grabbed my ankle, and I went down hard. Frank tried to pull me free, but more stalks wrapped around my legs, my arms, pulling me down into the soil. "Emily!" I screamed. She broke away from Margaret and ran toward me, but Frank held her back. "It's too late. The well has chosen." The last thing I saw before the earth swallowed me was Emily's face, twisted in anguish. I woke up surrounded by darkness and soil. I could feel it pressing against me from all sides, filling my mouth and nose. I should have suffocated, should have died, but I didn't. Instead, I felt the soil entering me, flowing through me, and with it came knowledge, the memories of everyone who'd ever been fed to the well. The original sacrifice, made by Frank's great-great-grandfather. The dozens of visitors over the generations who'd been consumed to feed the land. And I understood. The well wasn't evil. It was ancient and it was hungry, but it was also part of the natural cycle of death and renewal. It had existed long before humans came to this land, feeding on whatever fell into it. Animals, plants, anything organic. The Wheeler family hadn't created it. They'd just learned to negotiate with it. I also learned that I had a choice, even now. I could resist, let the well consume me completely, and die. Or I could accept it, become part of the farm's ecosystem, join the countless other consciousnesses that existed within the well's collective memory. I chose to accept. That was 3 years ago. I still live on the farm, still work the fields, tend the animals, help with the harvest to anyone who visits. And there are visitors because Emily and I got married, and we occasionally have friends come stay. I look like a normal person, a little pale maybe, a little quieter than I used to be, but normal enough. What they don't see is the connection I have to every plant, every animal, every square inch of soil on this property. I can feel the corn growing, sense when the cows are hungry, know when rain is coming days before it appears on any weather forecast. Emily says I'm part of the farm now, and she's right. The well feeds on me, slowly draining my life force, but it also sustains me. I don't get sick anymore, don't feel pain the way I used to. My aging has slowed to a crawl. I'll live a long time probably, decades, maybe even a century. And when I finally die, my essence will join all the others in the well, and the farm will continue its cycle. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, if I should have fought harder, refused the well's bargain, died on my own terms. But then I look out at the fields, golden in the sunset, and feel the pulse of life flowing through everything, and I think, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe being part of something larger than myself, something ancient and enduring, is worth the price. Emily is pregnant now. Our child will be the 6th generation to work this land, to feed the well and be fed by it in return. And someday, when our child is old enough, we'll take them down to the root cellar and show them the truth. We'll give them the same choice I was given, because that's how it works on the Wheeler family farm. The land provides, but only if you feed it in return. Story 5. The Bayou Song. There are places in Louisiana that maps don't show. Places where the swamp grows so thick that sunlight can't penetrate the canopy, where the water is black as oil and twice as deep. Places where the old ways still hold sway, and the creatures that live there remember a time before men with guns and laws came to tame the wilderness. I know, because I've been to one of those places, and I barely made it out alive. My name is Marcus Thibodeau, and I used to work as a wildlife biologist for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Used to, past tense, because after what I saw in the Atchafalaya Basin, I can't bring myself to go back into the field. It started with reports of missing persons near Lake Fosse Point. 3 people in 2 weeks, a fisherman, a couple of teenagers who'd gone out in a pirogue, and an elderly Cajun woman who lived in a cabin near the water's edge. The local sheriff wrote them off as drownings or gator attacks, but the families were convinced something else was responsible. Aucun corps, pas de sang, rien, the woman's son told me when I interviewed him. No bodies, no blood, nothing. He insisted his mother would never have fallen into the water. She'd lived in the swamp her entire life, knew every channel and sandbar. She was too smart, too careful. There's something out there, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Something that takes people. Mes grands-parents en parlaient. Les anciens le savent. My grandparents spoke of it. The old ones know. I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and walked away. Normally, I'd have dismissed his concerns as superstition, but 3 disappearances in such a short time was unusual, even for the treacherous waters of the Atchafalaya. So I organized a small research expedition, just me, my colleague Dr. Sarah Chen, and a local guide named Jean-Baptiste Hébert. Jean-Baptiste was in his 60s, a 3rd-generation swamper who knew the Atchafalaya better than anyone. If there was a dangerous animal or natural hazard causing the disappearances, he'd know about it. We set out just after dawn on a humid August morning. The plan was to survey the areas where the people had gone missing, take water samples, check for unusual algae blooms or bacterial contamination that might explain disorientation or illness. Logical, scientific, safe. We were idiots. The first few hours were uneventful. Jean-Baptiste piloted his flat-bottom boat through narrow channels choked with cypress knees and Spanish moss. Sarah took samples while I documented wildlife activity. Everything seemed normal. Egrets fishing in the shallows, turtles sunbathing on logs, the occasional gator's eyes watching us from just above the waterline. But as we penetrated deeper into the swamp, things started to change. The normal sounds of the bayou, birds, frogs, insects, gradually faded until we were surrounded by an eerie silence. Jean-Baptiste noticed it first, killing the boat's outboard motor and tilting his head to listen. Pas normal, he muttered. C'est trop calme. Too quiet. Maybe we scared off the wildlife, Sarah suggested. Jean-Baptiste shook his head. I've been coming here for 40 years. Never this quiet. Never. We continued on, using a push-pole to navigate the shallower areas. The water had become darker, almost black, and the cypress trees grew so close together that their branches formed a nearly solid canopy overhead. It was like entering a tunnel of vegetation, the sunlight reduced to thin beams that cut through the gloom. That's when we heard it. Singing. A woman's voice, clear and beautiful, singing in French. The melody was haunting, filled with longing and sorrow. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the swamp. Où es-tu, mon cœur? Perdu dans les eaux noires. Où es-tu, mon amour? Je chante pour toi dans l'obscurité. Where are you, my heart? Lost in the black waters. Where are you, my love? I sing for you in the darkness. Sarah looked at me, eyes wide. Is someone else out here? But Jean-Baptiste had gone pale. He was crossing himself repeatedly, muttering prayers under his breath. "We need to leave," he said urgently. "Now. We need to leave. Now." "What? Why? Someone might need help." "That's not a person," Jean-Baptiste interrupted, his voice shaking. "That's La Sirène Noire, the Black Siren. My grandfather told me about her. She sings to lure people into the deep water, and she... Mon Dieu, we have to go." He grabbed the push-pole and started trying to turn the boat around, but we drifted into a narrow channel with high banks on either side. The boat was too wide to turn easily. The singing grew louder, closer, and now we could hear something else. A splashing sound, like something large moving through the water toward us. "Start the motor," Sarah shouted at Jean-Baptiste. He yanked the outboard's pull cord once, twice, 3 times. It sputtered, but didn't catch. The splashing was getting closer. "Où es-tu, mon cœur?" The voice was right next to the boat now, though we still couldn't see the source. Jean-Baptiste pulled the cord again. The motor roared to life, and he gunned it, pushing the boat forward, even though we were still in the narrow channel. The boat scraped against a submerged log, nearly capsizing us. Then we saw her. She surfaced about 20 feet ahead of the boat, and she was beautiful. Long, dark hair floating around her like seaweed, pale skin that seemed to glow in the dim light, large, dark eyes that held an ancient sadness. But from the waist down, she wasn't human. Her lower body was scaled, serpentine, easily 15 feet long and as thick as a telephone pole. The scales were black with an iridescent sheen, shifting colors as she moved. "Mon Dieu," Jean-Baptiste whispered. The creature, La Sirène Noire, if Jean-Baptiste was right, looked directly at us and smiled. Her teeth were pointed like a shark's. "Où es-tu, mon cœur?" she sang again, her voice impossibly beautiful despite the horror of what we were seeing. Then she dove, her massive tail breaking the surface and sending a wave that nearly swamped our boat. "Hold on," Jean-Baptiste yelled, opening the throttle as far as it would go. We shot forward, the boat's hull scraping against hidden obstacles as Jean-Baptiste navigated purely by instinct. Behind us, we could hear splashing as the creature pursued. Sarah had her phone out, trying to get a signal, but there was no service this deep in the swamp. "We need to document this," she said, switching to the camera. "No one will believe us without..." The boat lurched as something massive struck it from below. We were airborne for a moment before crashing back down. Sarah's phone flew from her hand, disappearing into the black water. Jean-Baptiste fought to keep the boat under control as the creature circled us. We could see her shadow under the water, impossibly large, impossibly fast. Then she surfaced again, this time right beside the boat. Up close, she was even more terrifying. Her eyes, which had seemed almost human from a distance, were actually more like a snake's, vertical pupils in pools of gold, and her skin, which had appeared pale and smooth, was actually covered in tiny scales that created an optical illusion of smoothness. She reached out with one webbed hand, fingers ending in black claws, and grabbed the side of the boat. The aluminum creaked under her grip. "Où es-tu, mon cœur?" she asked, and this time it wasn't a song. It was a question. She was looking directly at me. I don't understand," I stammered. Her head tilted, bird-like. Then she spoke in accented but clear English. "You wear his face. You have his eyes. Where is my heart? Where is my love? I don't know what you're talking about." Her expression shifted to one of rage. "Liar! You Thibodeau men, always liars. He promised to come back, promised we would be together. But he left me here, alone in the darkness, and I have waited, and waited, and waited." The boat tilted dangerously as she pulled down on it, trying to capsize us. Water poured over the gunwale. "Je ne suis pas. I'm not whoever you're looking for," I shouted. "Please!" Jean-Baptiste had gone very still. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible over the sound of the outboard motor. "Marcus, what was your grandfather's name?" "What? Why does that matter right now?" "What was his name?" "Etienne. Etienne Thibodeau." "Why?" Jean-Baptiste closed his eyes. "Mon Dieu, c'est vrai. The stories are true." "What stories?" But before he could answer, La Sirène spoke again, her eyes locked on mine. "Etienne, yes, he promised to return to me. We loved each other, he and I, but his family forbid it, called me monster, demon. They took him away, married him to a human woman, and he never came back." "How long ago was this?" Sarah asked, her scientific mind somehow still functioning despite the insanity of the situation. "Long, so long. I have lost count of the years, but I remember, I wait, and when I see the Thibodeau face, I hope, and I rage." Understanding dawned on me. The missing people. Did you? They wore his face, had his eyes, but they were not him. So I took them, kept them with me in the deep places, hoping they would remember, would become him again. But they always disappoint me. They always expire. Jean-Baptiste was already reaching for something in a storage compartment under his seat. He pulled out an old leather bag and removed what looked like a bundle of dried herbs tied with red string. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "My grandmother made this. Protection contre les créatures des eaux sombres. Protection against creatures of the dark waters." He began chanting in Cajun French, words I didn't fully understand, while waving the herb bundle over the boat. The Sirène hissed and recoiled, releasing her grip on the boat. "You dare!" she shrieked. "You dare use the old magic against me?" "Go back to the deep," Jean-Baptiste commanded, his voice stronger now. "This man is not your Etienne. Your love is gone, passed on many generations ago. Let him rest. Let us all rest." The Sirène's expression cycled through rage, to sorrow, to something that looked almost like acceptance. "Gone? Truly?" "Dead and buried 60 years past," Jean-Baptiste confirmed, more gently. "I knew him. A good man. But he had a family, a life. He could not return to you." She let out a wail that made the water around us ripple. It was a sound of pure grief, so profound that I felt tears streaming down my own face in response. "Then what am I to do?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "I have waited so long. I have nothing else." Sarah, showing more courage than I would have credited, leaned forward. "You could stop. Stop taking people. Stop waiting for someone who will never come. Find peace." La Sirène stared at Sarah for a long moment. Then she looked back at me. "You have his face, but you are not him. I see that now." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Whatever she was, monster or not, her grief was real. She nodded slowly. "Perhaps it is time. Time to sleep. To let go." She dove one final time, her massive tail rising up before sliding beneath the black water. And then she was gone. We sat in silence for several minutes, barely breathing, waiting to see if she would return. When she didn't, Jean-Baptiste started the motor again and guided us back through the swamp channels, out toward more familiar waters. None of us spoke during the journey back. What could we say? We'd encountered something that shouldn't exist, something out of legend, and we'd somehow survived. When we finally reached the boat launch and pulled the boat out of the water, Sarah turned to Jean-Baptiste. The protection herbs, the chant. Where did you learn that? From my grandmother, like I said. She learned from her grandmother. The old knowledge, passed down. There are things in these swamps, things that were here long before us and will be here long after. We've learned to coexist, usually. And my grandfather, I asked, did he really? Was she telling the truth? Jean-Baptiste sighed. Your grandfather was a good man, Marcus. But yes, when he was young, there were stories. A forbidden romance with something not quite human. His parents found out, sent him away to Baton Rouge for 2 years. When he came back, he was married to your grandmother. He never spoke of what happened before, never went into the deep swamp again. And that thing, La Sirène Noire, she just waited? All this time? Love and grief don't follow human timelines, Marcus, especially not for creatures that live as long as she has. Sarah had been documenting everything on her tablet, writing frantically. We need to report this. There are protocols for encounters with unknown species. No, Jean-Baptiste said firmly. You write your reports if you must, but you leave out what we saw. You talk about dangerous currents, unexplored areas, standard bayou hazards, but you don't mention her. Why not? This could be one of the most important zoological discoveries, because people will come looking for her. Hunters, scientists, thrill seekers, and she may have agreed to let us go, to stop taking people. But if humans come for her, try to capture or kill her, she won't be so merciful, and neither will the other things that live in the deep places. Other things? I asked. Jean-Baptiste smiled grimly. You think she's the only one? The swamp is old, Marcus. Old and deep and full of secrets. La Sirène Noire is just one of many, and they're best left alone. That was 5 years ago. Sarah filed a report that mentioned environmental hazards and recommended certain areas be designated as off-limits to recreational use, but she left out any mention of what we'd actually encountered. The missing persons cases were officially classified as probable drownings. No new disappearances have been reported in that area since our encounter. I like to think that means La Sirène Noire found her peace, that she's sleeping somewhere in the deepest, darkest part of the bayou, dreaming of a love that was never meant to be. But sometimes, late at night, I think I hear singing. A woman's voice, clear and beautiful, singing in French about lost love and black waters. And I wonder if she's really at peace, or if she's still down there, still waiting, still hoping that someone with the right face will finally return to her. I don't go into the swamp anymore. Can't bring myself to do it. My career as a wildlife biologist is over. I work in an office now, pushing papers, analyzing data other people collect, because I know what's out there in those dark waters, and I know that human science, human logic, human understanding, none of it applies to the ancient things that make their home in the forgotten places of the world. The bayou remembers. The bayou keeps its secrets. And the bayou sings, even when no one is there to hear it. If you ever find yourself in the Atchafalaya Basin, in those narrow channels where the sunlight can't reach, and you hear a woman singing in French about lost love and dark waters, turn your boat around. Don't investigate. Don't try to help. Just leave. Because La Sirène Noire may have found peace, but there are others out there who haven't. Others who are still hungry, still angry, still waiting. And they don't all show mercy to those who wear the wrong face. Story 6. The Lighthouse Keeper's Log. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm writing this as a warning to anyone who might come after me. I took the job as lighthouse keeper on Brecon Point because I needed to disappear. Not in the criminal sense. I wasn't running from the law. I was running from myself, from memories I couldn't escape in the city, from a life that had fallen apart so completely that starting over seemed like the only option. The job posting was almost too good to be true. 6 months of solitude on a remote lighthouse off the coast of Maine, maintaining the automated beacon system and performing routine inspections, room, board, and a salary that was generous for what amounted to glorified caretaking. The only catch was the isolation. Supply boats came once a month, weather permitting, and there was no internet, no cell service, just a radio for emergencies. Perfect. The lighthouse itself was built in 1847, a classic New England structure of granite blocks and iron railings, perched on a rocky outcrop that barely qualified as an island. At high tide, it was completely cut off from the mainland. At low tide, a treacherous causeway of slippery rocks emerged, but the Coast Guard strongly discouraged anyone from trying to cross it. Mr. Hendricks, the regional supervisor, gave me the orientation during the boat ride out. Previous keeper left after 3 months, he said, not meeting my eyes. Said it wasn't a good fit. What happened? Nothing happened. He just left. Radioed for an emergency pickup, wouldn't say why. We've had trouble keeping someone long-term for the past few years. How long-term are we talking? Longest anyone's lasted in the past decade was 8 months. Most don't make it past 4. I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why they were so desperate to fill the position that they'd hired me with barely an interview. But I was desperate too, so I didn't press it. The lighthouse keeper's quarters were Spartan but functional. A small bedroom, a kitchen with a propane stove, a bathroom with a solar-heated water tank, and a common room with a wood stove and shelves lined with books left by previous keepers. There was also a desk with a leather-bound logbook where I was supposed to record daily weather observations, maintenance activities, and anything unusual. I flipped through the previous entries. Most were routine: wind speed, visibility, minor repairs. But occasionally, there were odd notations. October 15th, heard voices in the fog, no boats visible. November 3rd, something scratching at the door. Wind? December 1st, can't sleep. The light feels wrong tonight. The handwriting became increasingly erratic toward the end, until the final entry. I can't stay here anymore. I won't become like them. Like who, I wondered, but I was too tired from the journey to worry about it. The first few days were peaceful. I fell into a routine. Wake at dawn, check the beacon mechanism, record weather data, perform maintenance tasks, read, sleep. The solitude was exactly what I'd wanted. No people, no obligations, no reminders of everything I'd lost. But on the 4th night, I heard the voices. I was in bed, drifting toward sleep, when I heard what sounded like people talking just outside the lighthouse. Multiple voices, men and women, speaking in urgent whispers that I couldn't quite make out. I got up and looked out the window. Nothing. Just darkness and the steady pulse of the lighthouse beam sweeping across the water. I opened the door and stepped outside. The voices stopped immediately. "Hello," I called out. No response, just the sound of waves against rocks and the distant cry of seabirds. I convinced myself it was the wind, maybe the particular way it whistled through the rocks, creating an auditory illusion. I'd read about that. Pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns in random noise. But the next night, I heard them again, and this time I could make out words. Can't leave. Trapped here. Help us. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, shining it in every direction. The beam caught nothing but rocks, water, and the occasional gull startled from its roost. "Who's there?" I shouted. The voices stopped, but this time I heard something else. Footsteps. Someone walking on the rocks below the lighthouse, their feet crunching on barnacles and seaweed. I aimed the flashlight down and saw a figure. Human-shaped, but wrong. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, and when my light hit it, it didn't cast a shadow the way it should have. Then it looked up at me, and I saw its face. It was rotting. Not like a corpse, this was different. The flesh looked waterlogged, bloated, with seaweed and small crustaceans clinging to the skin. The eyes were clouded over, milky white, but they tracked my movement. I stumbled backward and slammed the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. It had to be my imagination. Stress, isolation, the power of suggestion from those strange log entries. I was seeing things that weren't there, but the footsteps continued for another hour, circling the lighthouse, accompanied by wet breathing sounds and occasional moans that might have been the wind or might have been something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I radioed Mr. Hendricks. "Everything all right out there, Mercer?" His voice crackled with static. Yeah, fine. Just checking the radio works." "Uh-huh. You seeing things yet?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" The previous keepers, they all reported disturbances, sounds, shapes in the fog, that sort of thing. It's just the isolation playing tricks. Gets to everyone eventually. You'll get used to it. What if it's not tricks? A long pause. "What did you see?" "Nothing. Forget I asked." "Mercer, listen to me. Whatever you think you're experiencing out there, it's not real. It can't hurt you. Just stay inside at night, keep the light running, and try to ignore it. Can you do that?" Yeah, I can do that. But I couldn't. That night, the voices were louder, more insistent, and they weren't outside anymore. They were coming from inside the lighthouse. I searched every room, every closet, even the cramped mechanical spaces where the beacon mechanism lived. Nothing, but I could still hear them, whispering from the walls themselves. "Join us. You belong here. Keeper belongs to the light." I tried to block it out with music from an old battery-powered radio, but the voices cut through it. I tried earplugs, but they only made the voices seem louder, like they were coming from inside my own head. Finally, exhausted and desperate, I opened the logbook and started reading from the beginning. Not just the recent entries, but going back decades. The pattern was clear. Every keeper reported the same progression. First the voices, then the figures, then something worse. Many left before reaching that final stage. But some. An entry from 1982. "They're not trying to scare me away. They're trying to keep me here. I understand now. The lighthouse needs a keeper, and the keepers never truly leave." An entry from 1967. "Found bones in the rocks below the lighthouse. Human bones. Coast Guard claims they're from shipwreck victims, but I counted 12 skulls. How many ships wrecked here?" An entry from 1923. "The light is alive. I can feel it watching me, even when my back is turned. It wants something from me, but I don't know what. And the oldest entry I could find, from 1891. God forgive me. I know what I must do. The light must never go dark. The price must be paid. When my time comes, I will join the others, and the next keeper will take my place. This is the way it has always been. My hands were shaking as I closed the logbook. The lighthouse needed a keeper, and the keepers never left. I understood now why the position was hard to fill, why people rarely lasted more than a few months. This wasn't just isolation-induced madness. Something was here, something old and hungry, and it had been claiming lighthouse keepers for over a century. I had to get off this island. I grabbed the radio and called for emergency pickup. Mr. Hendricks, I need immediate evacuation. I don't care about the contract. I don't care about the money. I need off this island now. Static. Then, Mercer, calm down. What's wrong? There's something here. The voices, the figures, they're real. I don't know what they are, but they're not going away, and I can't. Mercer, listen to me very carefully. What you're experiencing is a psychological response to extreme isolation. It happens to everyone. If you leave now, you'll forfeit your entire salary, 6 months of pay, gone. Is that really what you want? I don't care about the money. Think about why you took this job. You needed to escape something, right? Whatever you were running from, it's still out there. At least here, you're safe. Safe? Safe. There are dead people here, Hendricks, or ghosts or something. They want me to stay, to become one of them. There's a storm coming in. We can't send a boat for at least 3 days. I need you to hold it together until then. Can you do that? I looked out the window. The sky was already darkening, clouds rolling in from the east. 3 days, I said weakly. 3 days. Stay inside, keep the light running, and try to sleep. You'll be fine. The radio went dead. I wasn't fine. That night, during the height of the storm, the lighthouse went dark. I checked the mechanism. Nothing wrong with it. The power was flowing. The bulb was intact, but the light simply wouldn't turn on. And in the darkness, they came. The door to the lighthouse burst open, and they poured in. Dozens of them. The waterlogged corpses of every lighthouse keeper who'd ever served here. Their bodies preserved by salt and cold and something else, something unnatural. They didn't speak with their mouths. The voices came from the walls, the floor, the very structure of the lighthouse itself. Join us, keeper. Tend the light. Never leave. This is your place now. I ran up the spiral stairs to the lantern room, the highest point of the lighthouse, with nowhere left to run. They followed, their wet footsteps echoing on the iron steps. When I reached the top, I understood. The lighthouse wasn't just a building. It was a prison, a trap. Every keeper who'd ever served here had been absorbed into it, their spirits or souls or whatever you want to call it, bound to the structure forever, maintaining some kind of supernatural beacon that called to ships, to sailors, to anyone foolish enough to answer its summons. The light didn't protect ships from the rocks. It lured them to destruction. And the keepers were the bait. I could feel it pulling at me, trying to add me to its collection. My vision blurred. My thoughts grew foggy. I felt myself starting to merge with the lighthouse, to become part of its hungry, ancient consciousness. But I fought it. I'm not a brave man. I'm not strong. But I was angry. Angry at being lied to, manipulated, trapped. That anger gave me just enough strength to resist. With the last of my will, I grabbed the emergency flare gun from the lantern room's safety cabinet and fired it directly into the beacon mechanism. The explosion was smaller than I hoped, but it was enough. The beacon shattered, glass and metal raining down. Sparks flew, igniting the oil-soaked rags I'd been using to clean the equipment. Fire spread quickly through the lantern room. The voices became screams. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all crying out in rage and pain as the lighthouse began to burn. I climbed out onto the exterior gallery, the narrow walkway that circled the lantern room. Below me, the storm-churned ocean crashed against the rocks. Behind me, flames consumed the lighthouse. The choice was simple: burn with the lighthouse or jump. I jumped. The fall should have killed me. The rocks should have broken every bone in my body. But somehow, impossibly, I landed in deep water between the rocks and managed to claw my way to a small ledge. I clung to that ledge for 3 hours, watching the lighthouse burn, listening to the screams gradually fade as the fire consumed everything. When the Coast Guard finally arrived the next morning, the storm having passed, they found me barely conscious, suffering from hypothermia and saltwater exposure. The official report said the lighthouse was destroyed by a lightning strike during the storm. They said I was lucky to survive. They said I was a hero for trying to save the structure. They were wrong on all counts. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. When I was released, Mr. Hendricks was waiting for me. "You destroyed federal property," he said coldly. "Sue me." "We should. We could press criminal charges, but we won't." "Why not?" "Because you did what 15 keepers before you couldn't do. You freed them, and you stopped the lighthouse from claiming anyone else." "You knew," I said. "You knew what that place was, what it did to people, and you kept sending keepers there anyway. The light had to stay on. Those were our orders going back over a century. Keep the light burning, no matter the cost. We didn't know how to stop it until you showed us." Orders from who? But he just shook his head and walked away. That was 6 months ago. I'm writing this from a small apartment in Portland, working a normal job, trying to rebuild my life. I still have nightmares about the lighthouse, about the voices, about the burning. Sometimes I drive up the coast and look out at Brecon Point. The ruins are still there, a charred skeleton of granite and twisted metal. The Coast Guard hasn't rebuilt it. They say the location isn't strategically necessary anymore, that modern GPS has made the old lighthouse system obsolete. But I know the real reason. Some lights are meant to go dark. Some places are meant to stay abandoned. And some jobs should never be filled. If you ever see a posting for a remote lighthouse keeper position with generous pay and minimal requirements, don't take it. Don't be tempted by the money or the solitude or the promise of a fresh start, because the lighthouse keeps its keepers, and they never, ever leave. Story 7. The Last Broadcast. This is station WKRH 104.7 FM, broadcasting from somewhere in the American heartland. If you're hearing this, I don't know if I should say you're lucky or cursed. My name is Casey Richardson, and I'm a late-night radio host, or at least I was. Now I'm not sure what I am. Let me start from the beginning. I'd been doing the overnight shift at WKRH for about 3 years. Midnight to 6 a.m., playing classic rock and taking calls from insomniacs, long-haul truckers, and the occasional drunk college student. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. and I liked the solitude. The station itself was in an old building on the outskirts of town, a converted farmhouse from the 1950s that had been retrofitted with broadcasting equipment decades ago. It was just me and the equipment during my shift. The station manager would leave at midnight, and I wouldn't see another living soul until the morning DJ arrived at 6. It was quiet, peaceful, exactly what I wanted. The weird calls started in October. At first, they seemed like pranks. Someone would call in and just breathe. Not heavy breathing like a pervert, just normal breathing. When I'd say hello, they'd hang up. Then the breathing calls started coming regularly. Every night, around 3 a.m., what radio people call the witching hour, the same pattern. The phone would ring, I'd answer, breathing, hang up. I mentioned it to Derek, the station manager, but he just shrugged. Comes with the territory, block the number. The problem was, the calls showed up as unknown number on the caller ID. There was nothing to block. After 2 weeks of this, the caller finally spoke. "Do you know what you're doing?" A woman's voice, distorted, like she was speaking through water. "What am I doing?" I asked, keeping my tone professional. "You're opening the door. Every night you open the door a little wider." "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. If you're going to keep calling just to mess with me." "Listen to the static," she said. "Really listen. You'll hear them." Then she hung up. I should have ignored it. Should have written her off as another lonely weirdo with too much time on her hands. But curiosity got the better of me. That night, during a song break, I turned off the music and listened to the ambient sound of the studio. The gentle hum of equipment, the distant rumble of the heating system, and underneath it all, static. Every radio station has static. It's just part of the electromagnetic background of the universe. Usually it's filtered out, but if you listen carefully, it's always there. I put on headphones and really focused on it, and I heard voices. Faint, barely distinguishable from the random noise, but definitely voices. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once in a susurrus of overlapping words. "Help us. Trapped. So cold. Let us out." I yanked the headphones off, my heart racing. It was just pareidolia again, I told myself, my brain finding patterns in randomness. But it had sounded so real. The phone rang. "You heard them," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" "Someone who tried to warn the ones before you. They didn't listen either." "The ones before me? What are you talking about? How many overnight DJs has your station had in the past 10 years? I didn't know. I'd never thought to ask. 12, she said, answering her own question. 12 DJs in 10 years. And do you know where they are now? No, neither do I. Neither does anyone. They just disappeared. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to save you. Stop broadcasting. Quit the job. Leave that building and never go back. I need this job. You need to stay alive more. Please, learn from the mistakes of those who came before you. Leave while you still can. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to pack up and walk out right then. But the rational part of my brain said this was all nonsense, an elaborate prank, or maybe someone's idea of a scary story for Halloween. I decided to do some research. The next day, I went to the local library and looked up the history of WKRH. The station had been broadcasting since 1962, originally as an AM station, before switching to FM in the 80s. There were photos of various staff members over the decades. including several overnight DJs. I recognized none of their faces, didn't know any of their names, and when I tried to look them up online, I found nothing. No social media profiles, no obituaries, no records of them existing anywhere after they stopped working at WKRH. It was like they'd been erased. I confronted Derek about it. "What happened to the previous overnight DJs?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "They moved on, found other jobs." "Where?" "I don't know. People come and go in radio. It's a transient industry." 12 people in 10 years, Derek. That's not normal turnover. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting something weird is going on with the overnight shift, and I think you know what it is." He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he sighed. "Look, Casey, I like you. You're good at your job. But if you start asking too many questions, I can't protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From the same thing that got the others. Just do your job. Don't dig into things you don't understand, and you'll be fine. And if I quit, then you quit. No hard feelings, but you'll never get another radio job in this state. I'll make sure of that." It was a threat, thinly veiled. I could keep the job and risk whatever had happened to the others, or quit and destroy my career. I chose to keep the job, but I also started taking precautions. I set up a camera in the studio to record my shifts. I started keeping a journal of everything weird that happened, and I stopped listening to the static. But the static was listening to me. The voices started coming through during broadcasts. At first, they were barely audible, buried beneath the music. But listeners started calling in to ask about them. "Hey Casey, what's with the weird whispering during that last song? Are you running some kind of experimental sound effect? It's creeping me out. I swear, I heard someone say my name during the commercial break." I checked the recordings. They were right. The voices were there, getting louder every night. And they weren't random anymore. They were saying specific things, names, addresses, dates. One night, a voice came through crystal clear during a quiet moment. "Casey Richardson, 432 Maple Street, apartment 3B. That was my address. I called Derek immediately. "I'm done. I quit. Find someone else for the overnight shift." "You can't quit mid-shift." "Watch me." I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. But when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. The lock hadn't engaged. The door wasn't stuck. It just wouldn't open, like there was an invisible barrier preventing me from leaving. I tried the windows. Same thing. I could touch the glass, could unlock them, but couldn't actually open them. I was trapped. "What's happening?" I screamed at the empty studio. The speakers crackled to life, even though I hadn't turned them on. "You opened the door," dozens of voices said in unison. "Now, you have to finish the broadcast." "No, let me out. We've been waiting so long, so cold, so lonely. We just want to be heard." "I don't understand." "The station is a conduit," the voices explained. "A thin place where our world and yours overlap. Every broadcast weakens the barrier. Every night, you let us through a little more. We're almost free now, just a little longer." "Free to do what?" "To live again. To take the place of someone who still breathes. We each choose one. The previous DJs, they were ours. And now..." I understood. The voices weren't random. They were the dead, or something like the dead, trapped in the static between stations, between worlds. And they were using the radio broadcasts to find their way back. Each overnight DJ had been a key, opening the door a little wider. And when the door opened far enough, the voices claimed them, took their places, erased them from existence. I was about to be next. Unless I could close the door, I ran to the broadcasting equipment and started shutting things down. But every time I turned something off, it turned back on. The voices were in control now. You can't stop the broadcast, Casey. It's too late. But maybe I couldn't stop the broadcast. Maybe, though, I could change what was being broadcast. I grabbed the microphone and started talking. If you're listening to this, I need your help. This is station WKRH, and something is very wrong here. I'm trapped in the studio with, I don't know what they are, spirits, ghosts, something worse. They're trying to use the broadcast to escape into our world, and they're going to take my place if I can't stop them. The lights in the studio started flickering. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. I know this sounds insane, but I'm begging you, if you're listening, call someone. The police, the fire department, anyone. The station is at 1847 County Road 12. Please, I need... The microphone cut off. Every piece of equipment in the studio shut down simultaneously. Then, in the darkness, I felt them. Cold hands touching my shoulders, my arms, my face. Dozens of them, hundreds, all reaching out from the static, trying to pull me in. I struggled, fought, screamed, but there were too many of them. I felt myself being pulled apart, scattered across the airwaves like static, like noise, like nothing. And then, light. Sirens. The door to the studio burst open and firefighters poured in. We got a call about someone trapped. Are you okay? I collapsed into their arms, sobbing with relief. Someone had heard. Someone had called for help. The broadcast had worked. The firefighters got me out of the building. As I stood in the parking lot, wrapped in a blanket and watching the station through the windows, I saw them. Faces in the glass, dozens of them pressed against the windows from the inside, their mouths open in silent screams. The previous DJs, the voices in the static, all trapped there, unable to escape now that someone had interfered with their plan. WKRH shut down the next day. The FCC revoked their license for safety violations, though the real reason was never made public. Derek disappeared. I don't know if he was part of it or just another victim. I never saw him again. As for me, I left radio entirely. Couldn't stomach the idea of being around broadcasting equipment after what happened. I work in retail now, boring and safe, but sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I turn on the radio and scan through the static between stations, and I hear them, still there, still waiting, still calling for someone to open the door. If you work in radio, especially overnight shifts at small stations in old buildings, be careful. Listen to what's underneath the music. Pay attention to the static, because sometimes the static is listening back, and it's hungry. This is Casey Richardson, signing off for the last time. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't open the door.